Hey guys, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrials.guru. That will work just as well. As always, you can send in your questions, Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I will get your answers back, maybe through a video. I'll keep you anonymous. Also, social media, I'm everywhere. And if you're on YouTube or the blog, thank you first of all for watching, and then subscribe. Make sure you subscribe. I have giveaways all the time. I just gave away like 10 follow-up t-shirts. I know some of you guys are still waiting on yours. They are coming, I promise. So today's video is going to be not necessarily a response to any particular question I received, but it's more of a theme I'm seeing over these past 5 years that I've actually done this blog. And then over the past decade that I've been managing, running, owning, selling, flipping, you name it, research clinics across the country now. Alright, so one of them is, the main issue that I'm going to be focusing on is employee retention. Okay, so this issue is the same across research sites, SMOs, and CROs. Okay, I'm noticing the same pattern that is not changing. And look, I'm all about pragmatic, practical advice. I'm not about sitting in an ivory tower and thinking like an academic, hypothesizing how I think the world should work, or at least our industry should work. And I don't talk about things that I definitely see coming, but are so far ahead in the future that they're not practical now. One of these things being online studies, virtual trials. So I do see that. I've interviewed people on virtual trials, but I still see that as 5 to 10 years out. And my goal is to talk about things that are pertinent to research companies now, today, in 2014, going on 2015. So employee retention is one thing that keeps popping up. I keep getting questions from frustrated coordinators, from frustrated CRAs, from frustrated site owners, all about, hey, either my coordinators are leaving, my CRAs are leaving for another company, or vice versa, the CRAs and the coordinators telling me that they're leaving their company because of many reasons. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about employee retention. I don't want to go too long into this, but I'm going to break it down into why I think we don't do a very good job of employee retention in clinical research, and how I think we can probably solve some of these problems, okay? Because we can't solve all of them, but we can solve some of them. So one thing I've noticed is it's almost rarely, never about money. When a study coordinator leaves to go to another site, or a CRA leaves to go to another CRO, it's usually not about money. There's usually been a breakdown of communication somewhere between either the study coordinator and his or her direct supervisors, or the CRA and his or her direct supervisors. Another thing I've noticed is that in our industry, most of the work, let's face it, most of the work is actually done by the coordinators or the CRAs. Sure, you have the PIs at the sites, and you have the project managers and medical monitors at the CROs, but the vast majority of the actual legwork, I don't want to call it grunt work, but the vast majority of the activity is conducted by study coordinator or the CRA. In fact, the study coordinator are often referred to as the backbone of the entire clinical trial. So what usually happens is a coordinator comes into a clinic very excited to start working there. They get a couple studies, they do really well on those studies, and they get rewarded by getting more studies. And they continue doing well on those studies, then they get rewarded again by getting more studies. So we need to find, at the research clinics, we need to find and we need to create some type of compensation structure that has a lot of incentives. Incentives for continuing to produce good work, for continuing to enroll subjects, and not losing motivation in doing those things, okay? And for CROs and CRAs, the same thing. You want to have some kind of compensation schedule laid out, a formal one that your organization approves, that rewards CRAs for good work, good behavior, and things that would benefit the organization. So what I've seen from many, myself included, I'm guilty of this as well. I've since changed this, but when I'm running a clinic, I'm thinking about profits and I'm thinking about my employees, and I expect them to produce good work. That's why I hired them. And I've since changed this, but in the past, I would reward coordinators who are doing well with more work, and the ones who weren't doing well were either let go or they ended up leaving on their own. So I've since changed this. I've included some bonuses, some rewards in the compensation plans for these study coordinators, and they're filled with incentives. If you can keep monitors happy or bring in more studies, you get a commission, so to speak, or a bonus. If you can maintain a certain level of activity as far as patient visits per week for your studies, you get another commission or bonus. The same is true for PIs, by the way, but I have a whole other series of videos on how to pay PIs, and it's also filled with incentives. Okay, now I'm currently also running a CRO. It's a small one, but it's going to grow. I'm bootstrapping it, and with the few CRAs that we have, okay, we are going to have incentives for them as well. So incentives for a CRA would be how their sites are doing, how their sites are performing. Are their queries from the sites that they're in charge of monitoring on par or below queries from other sites and other CRAs? How many protocol deviations are going on at their sites versus other sites? How often are they traveling? How many studies are they willing to take on? How many sites are they willing to take on? Are they willing to help out with site selection visits and site initiation visits when another CRA can't do it? These are all things that I tie to incentives. And I think there's a lot of companies that do a good job at this, and it sounds so obvious, and it sounds like something that should be built into every compensation structure for these employees, but it's not. And oftentimes us leaders or us managers, us owners, lose sight of the fact that we're rewarding good work by giving more work, and that's not necessarily a good reward. Okay, so that's one of the issues I see with employee retention. And I know a lot of coordinators who have left companies not because they were going to get paid more at the other clinics. In fact, they were going to get paid less. But they just got fed up with making the clinics they were working for profitable and then not getting rewarded for it. And I had a podcast on this a couple of years back where I had an example of this exact thing that I'm talking about, where the owners would just keep giving their employees more work and not share any of the profits. And then they would buy corporate jets or rent corporate planes to go to college football games on the weekend. And employees see this. Employees see this and they say, hey, I'm working really hard for this company, and all I'm doing is helping them get wealthier, get richer, helping them have more fun, and I'm just getting more work. I don't need this. I'm going to go to this other company. I don't care if I get paid less. At least they might have a different attitude. And oftentimes they do, oftentimes they don't. They're not all as egregious as this example, but I do see this as a common theme from coordinators and CRAs. And so I guess the ultimate issue is lack of appreciation from the employers to the employees, and whether you want to have bonuses, incentives, or just something else you can think of that's creative that will acknowledge the fact that your employees are working hard for you and acknowledge the good ones, and not necessarily rewarding them with more work, but if you do, make sure you have some kind of profit sharing going on. That's what I would do. In my opinion, if the research clinic owners or research company owners are getting wealthier, so should the staff. And vice versa. If they're not profitable, then the staff should also have a decrease in pay. And oftentimes that happens. That's just business for you in a nutshell. So this is going on way too long, but that's my thoughts on employee retention and clinical research. I will do much more on this, maybe in a longer form podcast later on, because I keep getting these questions in constantly. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on this. I'm guilty of this from time to time. I try not to be. I've made changes to the structures of our compensation schedules at my sites. Let me know your thoughts on this. I want to hear from coordinators, I want to hear from monitors, and I want to hear from project managers, site owners, site directors. I want to hear from all stakeholders when it comes to this issue, because I think we can do a better job, all right? Thank you guys. This is Dan from theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Take care.